Got it. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This month we read a very dense book. I actually read the physical book itself, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. She was had committed to making the meeting, and then I got a note from her saying that her schedule was just too crazy and was unable to join us tonight. So that is why she is not here. It would have been really cool to have had her because I had 1,000 questions for her. But we will go with on our discussion without her. So with that, I just want to let you guys know, is anybody new? Because the way this usually works, anybody new?
No.
Okay. Well, you guys know how to do it. There's a chat feature at the bottom. You raise your hand when you have something you want to contribute, and keep yourself on mute in order to, avoid the background noises that often come up. I am home alone this evening, and my dogs are running in and out, so I will try not to let them bark and distract us too much. Hopefully they'll behave themselves. So with that, I wanted to get started with just talking about this book, a very dense book. The language is unbelievably, in my mind, rich as well, just gorgeous writing. And a book, really a coming of age book, an origin book, sort of, with a lot of themes, touched on a lot of issues that face portions of this country today. Themes of abandonment and loss, autonomy and freedom, search for identity, I think was, the biggest theme. And for Demon, trying to come up with his sense of value and his purpose in life. This book, I don't know if you guys have seen any of the mappings that have been done between this book and the book that was written 200 years ago by Charles Dickens called David Copperfield. But it's very closely parallel, just set in obviously a different scene. And that's what sort of attracted me to that. I don't know how many of you guys had a chance to read that way back when. I mean, I read it probably back in college or high school or sometime a long time ago. And I can't really remember it until I started reading this book and began to feel some of the same themes of poverty and children who feel that they are nothing. And so I thought this was sort of an interesting sort of take on that old classic story. So with that, I just wanted to sort of go around and get some impressions from all y'all. I mean, did everybody get a chance to get through it all? It's a long book. Yeah, and so no spoilers, then you don't mind if I have some spoilers. But it was a very, in my mind, at some points, I mean, I found myself falling in love with this character, Demon. He is, throughout the whole book, he was consistent and predictable, if you know what I mean. You kind of knew how he was going to react to a situation. And he always seemed to have hope, even at the worst points of his life, or at least this journey that he took us on. There was always something else for him, even at the worst moments. And so I found that, her being Barbara's sort of theme of hope that ran through this, even when situations were just terrible, really, it was enlightening for all of us to get a sense of that, throughout the worst that could possibly happen to someone. So with that, I wanted to sort of start off with, in terms of, Damon's, litany of challenges, there were several turning points in the book that really set him on a different course. And so I'd like to get a sense if you guys could sort of volunteer what you might thought some of those turning points were. Carol, I don't know if that's the issue, the question you're going to answer, if you got something else, but go ahead.
Said one quick question. I was wondering how many people listened to the book instead of read it.
Looks like Teresa did.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Eileen, did you have, or she came and she went? Eileen, do you have a question or you have a comment? Yes. We can't hear you, darling.
Let Carol talk first and then I'll.
Okay, Carol, go ahead. What do you want to?
Me?
Yeah, you have your hand up still. I don't know if you have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, I will put my hand down, but then I'll just say what I'm going to say.
Okay.
Like you said, impressions of it before the what ifs. And it's kind of crazy because I'm doing a workshop at the Mass Reading Conference tomorrow. about biography. And guess what slide I had on the screen before the meeting start? What if? The turning points and what if in a person's life. Don't
Right.
like serendipity. I listened to it, most of it. And I love Barbara Kingsolver, but this book really, I can't explain it, but I didn't like it.
You didn't
I
like
didn't
it?
like listening to it. I didn't like, I'm from New York City. I'm used to foul language, but it was just seemed to be like every other word. I think it was the narrator mostly, and the accent of the narrator that really disturbed me. I just felt bad for this guy because it was one thing after the other, but we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But I very rarely say I really disliked the book, and that if it wasn't for the meeting, I would have not gone through even half of it. So that's why I was wondering if anyone else had listened to it, because I love Barbara Kingsolver and I love her writing. So just wondering. That's all I have to say. See ya. No kidding.
Okay. Well, I didn't listen to it. And, having my mother is from West Virginia, and, we're not, I've spent a lot of my relatives are from, similar parts of the world. And so the accent or some of the language, the parochialism, I actually found comical and humorous in a lot of ways, because it's kind of what you listen to around, not necessarily in Leesburg, but you get a little further west. It's not too far from here. And then some of the poverty scenes and some of those images that I had experienced, growing up. Obviously nothing like what this guy went through, but just some of those scenes I could really see in my head. And so maybe it's a different, from where we're from, that may have made a difference, but I found it, I really enjoyed it, even though it's a tough book. So with that, I'll let Eileen go ahead and comments on some of the turning points and some of the things that sort of really made a difference in this guy's life.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I didn't find anything redeeming about this book. I
Really?
didn't like it at all.
Whoa.
The language didn't bother me. That doesn't bother me.
Whoa.
But I did not like it. I felt like he had opportunities to redeem himself, and he didn't. He was an enabler of his girlfriend, wife. There were so many people who could have supported him, but he refused to allow them to, as far as I was concerned. And I couldn't believe, and I just finished rereading David Copperfield, since everyone seems to be comparing this to Copperfield. And I have to say, oh my God, that is such an injustice to Charles Dickens to compare this book to Copperfield. I mean, David Copperfield is a story of redemption, and is somebody who picks himself up and makes the best of things, even though he's being abused and he's been beaten down a few times. But I could not believe how much she plagiarized from Dickens. Names of characters were the same. She didn't even bother changing names of characters. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I'm amazed that the Charles Dickens Society, or whatever there is, hasn't sued her in some way or another. Because I was appalled at the audacity of this woman to take a classic like Dickens and to think that she had the right to even borrow from it, or that she should be compared to Dickens. It was an affront to my sensibilities, to be perfectly honest.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt for a minute. I apologize, Sharon. I did not mean anything by, I love Southern accents. I have the worst accent, New York accent. I grew up in East New York, and I don't know if anyone watches that show on Sunday nights, but I grew up in a very dangerous neighborhood in New York City. I'm used to this. I just think it was the way it was narrated, not the accent.
Well, no offense at all on that. I mean, just putting it out there. I
Okay,
mean, it's a
just
different
needed to
perspective.
say that.
But it's interesting. I'm interested in Eileen's perspective here. And I've seen some other folks that really loved it. So Eileen, I'm gonna hold you on this just for a second, and then I'm gonna see what Kristen has to say, and we'll walk down the line, and Christine, and then we'll talk to Teresa. And I know that Jean's got some thoughts too. Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure.
Oh, Kristen.
We have more than one Christine, I guess.
Oh, Kristen and
sorry.
Christine. Sorry.
Kristen, go ahead.
Okay. I'm not sure now whether to react, whether I liked the book or not, or whether to talk about turning points in this book. I thought every death that he had in his life was another turning point, just another leg sweep, if you will, that like kicked him back on his butt. And it was challenging to like, with the foreshadowing and stuff, to know that it was coming again and again and again. And I kept looking at how thick that book was, going, oh my God, it's never going to end. And it was very tough to get through because of that. And I'm a very avid reader. So it's unusual to find a book like that. But in the end, I actually enjoyed it. And I thought it was a good thing to kind of, I don't know, pair off of Charles Dickens' book, because I thought it was a modern retelling of the story, that's what our challenges are today. So.
Interestingly, when you talk about the deaths, I think each death sent him, yes, back on his butt, but also either affirmed a false or a narrative that he had in his head, or it changed him to go into a different direction, either bad or good. So from that perspective, I think that, yes, those deaths were clearly turning points, but they also shifted him in sort of a different space, depending on what the incident was. And the big one, obviously, was with the death of Dory. That had, I think, more of an impact on him than his two friends dying at the death, whatever, the murder bowl or death knob or whatever the name of that place was. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Christine, now you. Okay. Sorry, dear.
Well, I will say I enjoyed it a great deal. I liked it all. And when I was about halfway through it, I took a look at your website and someone sent you a message, and I'm paraphrasing, saying, oh my goodness, how can I keep going? This book is really dragging in the middle. I need some inspiration. And your answer was, hang in there, it'll get better. I had read David Copperfield years ago, and I say I read it because I had books on tape, but it was the unabridged version. So I figure that's fair. I went to Wikipedia to refresh my memory of the plot of David Copperfield. And halfway through the description, I said, okay, that has happened. This has happened. I've met that person. And then, unfortunately, I read a whole bunch more that made me realize there was a lot more misery to come. But I stuck with it. And I'm very, very glad I did. And as far as this character, Demon, or Damon, which was his real name, not being able to pull himself up, I have to keep reminding myself that for most of this book, he's a kid. He's 16, 17 years old.
10 in the beginning, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, he's so young. And so I was impressed that he worked his way out as well as he did. Now, the way the language went, this is not quite a comment on language, more a comment on the style of the writing. I loved it. And I liked the way the author would say things in what we might describe as a deadpan way, and then just zip right on to something else. I started marking quotes for myself to remember, and then it got to be too much. So eventually I had to stop. But there was one quote that I just found where in high school, he was talking about another player on the football team. And he said that he was very fast. And this is a quote from the story. He claimed he got his speed from being youngest in a family of 9, and his mom only ever cooked for 8. So if that's not a deadpan remark that's going to make you rush yourself to the dinner table, there it is. So I enjoyed it a great deal. I don't find it insulting to Dickens. If anything, it would be what, an homage to Dickens that you liked so much. And this would inspire me to read more things by Barbara Kingsolver. And for who, I'm sorry, I do not remember the name of the person who said that he was an enabler for Dory. Dory was already addicted when he met her.
Right.
If anything, they were enabling each other and couldn't get out of it. And so I don't think of him as an enabler for her so much. I think if he had not supplied her with drugs, she'd have found another way to get them. She did before she met him, so I'm sure she would have continued. But I liked it a great deal. So thank you for the pick.
It's okay. Either way. Teresa.
Hi, I'm sorry I have my camera off because my eyes are so swollen with allergies.
A little bit of pollen around here these days, yes?
I know, it's really
The bad asthma
driving
day
me-
in Virginia right now.
driving me crazy. you know, I found the book, just the subject matter of the drug abuse, to be very depressing. But I did like the book, and I really liked Demon. And I, you know, have to remind myself that he was a child, essentially, for almost, how old was he when the book ended? Maybe 21, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
even know if he was quite that old. And I really, really admired his character, in that everything that was thrown at him, he had no choice but to deal with. He dealt with it almost basically on his own, and he dealt with some things that, God forbid, any of us have to deal with. Really, really tragic, losing his mom and the stepdad, and you know, it was my first time reading one of her books, and I did like it. Although, like I said, I found the subject matter sad, but it's something you know, you can't put your head in the sand about. So
Yeah, it does shine a lot of light on a number of things. You know, one, the poverty that still exists in Appalachia and elsewhere in this country, our failed foster system, the opioid crisis, obviously, which is a big theme here. And I think just the challenges that youth who come from, you know, broken homes, you know, divorce or death or poverty or drugs, whatever they come from, abuse, the challenges they face without proper mentors or without opportunity. And I think that it really, you know, tried to sort of direct a lot of, I mean, she was trying to address a lot of themes, I think, and that's maybe one of the reasons it was so dense. But those are all issues, I think, that she was, if you know how Barbara Kingsolver writes and the way she likes to point her lens on things, I think those are the things that she was really trying to send a message on. So, and they were tough themes, Teresa, I agree. And, you know, what's interesting is there was no real, you know, moment where you say, okay, and it's being solved how? It was just really, you know, through his self-actualization and his own persistence, that ultimately, and I guess just luck, that he did, you know, sort of survive it all.
Well,
Carol?
oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say one more thing. And it also, in life, sometimes you look at circumstances and you know, what is it about him that he survived when so many others didn't make it through that? So I really, really did enjoy it.
Carol, I think you're up again, but I'm going to skip you for a second and go to Laura because, you know, some other folks a little chance. Laura?
No, sorry. I didn't take my hand down.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm a huge fan of Flight Behavior, which is a very early Kingsolver novel. It's one of the books that turned me on to reading. And it was someone who came out of poverty and came out of having nothing and really, you know, it's like breaking the cycle. The language is okay in Demon. I don't have a problem with that. I really got it through a lot of it. And then I just said, you know what? I'm just going to read the summary. I just thought there were whole sections that could have been taken out. It's like these individual stories. And I think you just mentioned that could have just been completely taken out. That book could have been 150 pages shorter.
I was gonna, yeah, 300 pages. And I see Eileen shaking her head there, head there. And I will tell you that, yeah, it's dense and I got the characters. I'm sorry. I'm pretty good at being able to keep track of characters. You know, and then the nicknames of the characters made it very difficult. Fast Eddie or Fast Man or Fast
Forward.
Yes, that guy, you know, and then it just, you know, I had a hard time keeping track of, and then who was related to whom as well. I mean, I don't know if you guys found yourself doing a little org chart or whatever it is. I think, Laura, to your point, and probably to Eileen's, that if there was one big criticism I had there was there could have been, it could have used a really solid, hard edit because I found myself confused a good bit as to who was doing what to whom. And then there was a lot of subtleties of reading between the lines of, you know, what they were actually up to that I probably missed because you do get so bogged down in it. It's hard to sort of see some of the nuances that I'm sure that she was writing in. And that's why I said, yeah, it does sag in the middle, which is—
I wonder if the more popular you are, the less people think they can edit you.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay. I just finished Kate Morton's Homecoming. It was over 560 pages and it was beautiful. It was beautifully written. I
I
enjoyed
read
every
that
word.
too, and I couldn't put it down.
What book
I
is that?
could,
Homecoming,
Homecoming.
Kate
It
Morgan,
was
Morton.
astoundingly wonderful, and the Kingsolver, I fought my way through that.
Hey, Janine?
Hi there. Let me lower my hand before I forget to do that. Hi, everybody. I really, really like the book. The other book of Kingsolver's that I read was Poisonwood Bible. And I think literally 20 years ago, it was an Oprah book. I think that's why I picked it up. I really liked it. I
Loved it.
lyrical, and I loved it. And when I started, grew up in Atlanta. I went to University of Georgia, but I moved out here to San Francisco about 40 years ago. So I have family back east, but I don't live in the South anymore. So I liked reading, a lot of the phrases that came out of the characters' mouths. I'm like, yeah, I used to grow up hearing that. I went to school in Athens and all that good stuff. But about 20 years ago, in the New York Times Sunday magazine, when the OxyContin troubles just seemed to be erupting, for the first time, I realized it's still a problem. They sent a reporter down there, and some local person just drove them around town and trailer parks, and she would point to every house and say, they're addicted. She used to be the head of the cheerleading squad. She's addicted. And so I remember thinking, what are they doing? Go into rehab. You're like, fix it. What are you doing? And then I read this book, and he's like, I can't keep my Chick-fil-A down without taking whatever it was, Xanax and I really didn't get it. I didn't get how it just like takes over your body, and that's all you can do. And at some point toward the end of the book, he said, he's talking to somebody, and he said, I don't know anybody my age that doesn't take pills. It's everywhere. And she really gets, you understand that reading this book for 500 something pages. I thought it was excellent. I think it's very educational for people that don't really get what it's like to have your whole community sucked into this. This is a great book because we have problems out here with people and fentanyl, but it's not the whole city. It's a certain group of people that seem to have a problem with that. I just think this is an epic masterpiece of a book. And if you hadn't picked this, I wouldn't have read it. So thank you, Sharon. Really good. Really liked it.
Janet?
Okay, well, I wanted to let other people speak and hear what they had to say. And it's interesting that we seem to have a split here around this book. I read it months ago already. I got it from the library when it first came out, and I loved it. I've never read David Copperfield, so not able to make a comparison, which I guess is good. But I'm kind of a realist, and just as who's the last person that spoke? Totally.
Janine.
Janine, and Teresa too, what she said. Totally agree with those people. This is the way life is, whether it's in Appalachia or whether it's in San Francisco. When there are groups of people that get hooked on drugs, whether it's fentanyl or OxyContin, thank you, pharmaceutical companies. It's devastating. And for this to happen to kids as young as, Damon Demon was, trying to get his life together, in sports and then having, an injury. And that's how it happens to so many people. They have an injury, an accident, and they're prescribed drugs and they get hooked and they can't get out of it. And, this to me was just a perfect, example of life today. So I thank her. And, there was some Barbara Kingsolver book that I tried reading long ago. I don't even think I ever got through it. I'm just not a huge fan, I guess, of her previous work, but I think she did a great job with this. And if anybody thinks that this was long and dense, I am still trying to get through The Last Chairlift by John Irving, which is like almost 900 pages. And I didn't think I was going to get even halfway through, but it's getting better. So I'm going to slog through it. And I'm not recommending it to everybody because it's just definitely not something that everybody would like. But, you know, I kind of like long stories that get long and involved. And I like other kinds too. So, you know, I did enjoy it and I liked it a lot.
Jean?
Sharon, I will say, I agree with you. I liked the book a lot, but about halfway through, the first thing that came to my mind was she must have gotten paid by the word. Because I just was like, who is this? What is going on? Who is like, who is this character now? I had so much difficulty. It was like a cast of thousands, you know, and they kept adding people and scenarios and situations. And I kept thinking, there's not enough going on. She needed to throw 3 more characters into it, you know, but what dawned on me the entire time I read it was that it was so much like the miniseries Dope Sick, targeting the low socioeconomic town, targeting, you know, the big pharma going after certain areas and really pushing the meds, ignoring any of the side effects or the concerns, you know, leaving these poor people who already have so little to begin with as a rule to fend for themselves. You know, having been an educator and working with kids who had severe drug issues at times, I saw a lot of students in similar situations coming through the foster system, coming through probation system. And, you know, it's not an atypical thing for kids to, even if they have a single parent, to not be parented by anyone.
Mhm.
And, you know, when he got involved with Dory, the first thing that dawned on me was he's trying to save his mother. You know, his mother, he was so little when his mother died and everything happened around him and without any input or control. He had no say, he had nothing in what was going on with her. So then here comes Dory, he falls in love with her. She's an absolute mess. And he's going to figure out how to fix and save her, even if it means he has to be addicted alongside her in order to do it, because if he doesn't do that, he can't keep an eye on her. I mean, it's, you know, it's a sick and twisted dynamic in relationship, but he has absolutely no real role models for healthy life relationships and coping skills. He's never had that. So he's
The best
not
he got was from the Armstrongs.
correct. And he's not going to gain anything from the heir. You know, it upset me that all of the services that were supposed to be overseeing him were so lax. And unfortunately, that is a commentary on not the people in the systems necessarily, but the systems themselves. These days, it's a huge commentary on how we're letting so many people down and kids down, especially kids who are in the foster system. But I was impressed at the end because the one thing when he said, and I don't remember who said it, I don't know anybody my age who's not doing drugs. You know, he was right. And he also knew that he could never go back and stay in that town for any length of time because there wasn't anybody who was going to help him stay sober and straight there. There was no way. He knew he had to get away and start a new life. That was the coping skill that he had. I was actually impressed with the skills, that the resiliency that he did have to keep himself alive through some of this crazy.
Yeah.
Again, it was just pure, you know, almost feral kind of experience for him because yes, he had people in his life who cared about him, but they really weren't in it day to day to help him because everybody else was just fighting so hard for their own lives. You know, but I did, in the middle, I kept thinking, oh, I need to get through this. I want to get through it, but it was a slog in the middle for sure. And I kept thinking, okay, there's going to come a point where it's going to upswing.
Well, when I start speed reading, that's when I know, you know.
You know what? That's exactly it. I was just like, okay. And then I thought, all right, I can't do that too long because I'll miss something. You know,
There's a quote though, Jean, that that I had highlighted and I wanted to read it because I think that it kind of surmises what you've said about him being a kid and being in charge of nothing. And she says, this is from obviously his point of view, and it's early on. He says something like, a kid is a terrible thing to be. in charge of nothing. If you get past that and grown, it's easiest to forget about the misery and pretend you knew all along what you were doing, assuming you've ended up someplace you're proud to be. And if not, easier to forget the whole thing, period. So this is going to be option 3, not proud, not forgetting, not easy. And that's kind of sort of the theme of the book, you know, that he's trying to pull himself up from nothing to be
With
proud
nothing.
of something.
And with nothing,
And kind of having to do it on his own a lot of the time.
right?
And that's what I found so interesting about the way that she spun this tale. I will grant you, and Eileen, yes, it took way too long to get
Oh,
there.
yes, I agree.
All right, so
I
now
agree.
Miriam, I know she's not happy with the book. The look
No, I
on her
didn't like the
face.
book. I didn't like the book, but I have to say that I don't particularly like Barbara Kingsolver's books as a whole, but that's okay. So I have a lot of technical issues that I didn't like about the book, including the language, and the malaprops, which were, I wasn't quite sure why she threw them in, but it definitely showed the ignorance of the characters. But one of the things that bothered me the most is, been there, done that. I have been reading about the opioid crisis for 20 years. Dope Sick is fantastic. I read Beth Macy when it came out. I've just read her newest one, Raising Lazarus, which came out last year, about what's being done to help people recover from the opioid crisis. But I've been reading about the opioid crisis in Appalachia for 20 years. So why is Barbara Kingsolver writing about it now? And why is it like this big thing now when it's been a problem for a long time? And I guess because I've read so many books that either have the opioid crisis in them or involved around them or talk about it, this book to me was a been there, done that. And I was upset about that. The other thing that really bothers me at the end, and this is probably because she isn't being edited, is there is nothing at the end of the book that says, if you want to read more about this topic, here are some books. And these are the books I actually looked at to understand the opioid crisis. So neither of those two are in the back in the acknowledgements. And that to me is the biggest disservice to any of the people who are reading this book. And all the other stuff about all the technical writing that drove me nuts, that's all beside the point. If she's using this as something that's supposed to be didactic and teach people something, then provide that education at the end. Okay, that's my 2 cents. And I'm very happy to listen to everybody else.
Well, I appreciate you. I mean, really, this is about being honest and how you feel, because it gives me also feedback on the kind of books that you guys enjoy and the kind of books that you don't. So that's good to know as well. And I'm not batting 100. I'm not batting as way I should be batting this year, but that's okay. Beth.
Thank you. Sorry I was late, so somebody might have said this at the beginning. And when you're talking about the language of the book, maybe you're talking about the writing style, like that. Especially at the beginning, 2 things. She jam packs a sentence, which I came to like, but every sentence, just because it has a capital letter and a period, isn't a sentence. And that really bugged me. And I wondered, does she always write like that? Or was she writing like that because of this story? And so maybe that's why I dumped out of 2 of her other books. I dumped out of Unsheltered and the one about vegetable, mineral, whatever it is. I couldn't read them, but this one, because this group and another group were doing the book, I said, I have to stick with it. And after about 40 pages, but I couldn't skim because of the way she packs a sentence and the way she writes. But I'm glad I stuck with it, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you.
I think she was writing, as if she was she was Demon. So how he might write is probably where that came from. And Unsheltered, that's the last one that she wrote, I came out with, I guess it was. I'm with you. I had a hard time. I couldn't get through it. So, because it's very dense. Christine, I thought you had your hand up again. Did you not, Christine?
Well, I did, but it was a rather small comment. Someone a couple comments ago said that she thought that perhaps Barbara Kingsolver was paid by the word. Please let me know, but I think I've read that Dickens was also paid by the word. And a lot of his novels were serialized in newspapers.
Right.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Spin out a story, the more money he would make. And I went through a string of all sorts of Dickens books, again, on tape, because I had a long commute to work and it was easy. But all of his books are like that. They're all jam-packed with people and events and people getting picked up and slammed down and picked up again. And finally, there's a happy ending for some characters at the end, not all of them. So I think whether he knew it or not, whether his books were hurt by it or not, I'm pretty sure Dickens was also paid by the word.
Right.
And I've read some other long books myself. I'm just coming off of reading a couple of them. And if they're good, they're good. And the fact that they're long doesn't matter. That's just that much longer to enjoy it.
But I do agree, it was a bit tedious at times. I do want to point out a couple things that I sort of picked up on this, and maybe you guys did as well. You know, and I think, Jean, you might have mentioned it when you said that, you know, with Dory, he was trying to save his mother. And what I found interesting is that it was that search for belonging, that search for maternal love. I think that he was, you know, that was his quest through much of this. And at the end, it really became, I guess, the character June sort of became that mother. He sort of found that, and that was so maybe the completion of what he was looking for. But there were many people, I think, that he ran across in his travels or in his life early on that weren't motherly to them at all, that should have been, not in addition to his own mother, but for example, the Pegotts, I can't remember how to pronounce that name next door. I found them to be, you know, a very sad family, in that, you know, the beginning of the book, you thought that they were going to give him hope and really help him. But time after time, they let him down, and you know, the only time he really cried was when, you know, he begged if he could stay, and they said, no, you had to go back. And so that sort of search for maternal sort of acceptance and love, I think, was a big driving factor for him. Janine, you have a comment as well?
Yeah, this is sort of a sidetrack, but it's kind of fun, so I thought I'd share it. Dickens was paid by the word. He wrote stories in serial format, like it would show up in Harper's Magazine or whatever. The only Charles Dickens statue in the whole country, our country, United States, is in Philadelphia, in West Philadelphia, past Penn, because my sister used to live down the block from it. They had a Dickens festival every year. But back in the 1800s, when he was still alive and writing for Harper's or whoever, the people would ride down to the docks and wait for they knew that the ship was coming in from London with their magazines, and they would wait at the docks for the magazine. So just kind of a fun fact for anybody that reads old books that used to be serial. You know, people were just as excited to read them as we were, but they had to go down and get them off the boat. Just
kind of like Yellowstone or one of those series. You got to wait to the next installment or the next week or whatever, right? Similar concept.
But it's just fun. If you're ever in West Philadelphia, you know, on his birthday, go to the party. That's all. Thank you.
Carol?
I just wanted to clear something up. I am not a prude as far as language goes, and I read a lot of books. Like, what was the one we read about Harlem? Colin.
Harlem Shuffle by
Harlem Shuffle.
What's his face?
I
I like so much.
It was
Olsen.
actually
Colin.
a graphic description of a lot of things, and that's the writing. So it does go with the character. Maybe it's just I did like him and I did respect him, and I feel that he got a bum rap his entire life. But I think the way some of his everyday actions and other people's would describe were extremely graphic in nature, and maybe I just wasn't in the mood for it.
Well, I will tell you something that a good friend of mine who's an author told me one time, is that you should never write anything that you don't want your mother to read. So that's my rule of thumb. You know, just saying. Mona.
Let me get myself off.
You're on mute. You're off mute. Now you're on mute. We can't hear you.
For 30 seconds.
You're off.
Okay.
Now you're good.
Okay. I'm directionally challenged, so. So I really loved the character of June, warts and all. And for me, she seemed to actually get the piece about the drug part right away, which honestly was really not the case so much back in like the 1990s and even early 2000, you know. So I'm a retired nurse, and at one point had worked for one of the largest opioid pharmaceutical companies there is, and was very glad when we got spun away from that. So a lot of this would make me wince quite a bit, you know, going through all that, and the fact that it is terribly addicting and it's extremely hard to get for anybody to get through that. So which, you know, I'm glad he finally did, but I honestly loved June and was like a mother figure to him, you know, warts and all, you know, even though she had her issues with Emma. So, but I genuinely liked the book, you know, even the schloggy parts, and the names, the weird names that were thrown out there, like fast forward and whatnot, you know. So.
Well, that is a thing around here. I will tell you, growing up, I mean, everybody had a nickname, everybody. So, but I mean, these are really crazy nicknames too. I mean, like I said, I couldn't keep track of it all. I had very difficult time with that, so.
What was yours, Sharon? What was your nickname?
Sissy. But I hit like a boy, so, you know.
Like Angus.
I'm sure we all had nicknames of some sort, but all right. I had a bunch of questions, but I don't think you guys are really that into that as much as I thought you would be. In terms of, you know, talking about some of these, you know, when he ran away and just some of the horrible things that he experienced in foster care. I have a question for you guys though too. Do we get a sense of what years this was supposed to be taking place in? I could not figure that out.
1990 is when it first started.
Is that when it was? Did I miss that somewhere?
There
Yeah.
were brief references to something that I could allude to connect with the time frame, but then it kind of disappeared again and I'd lose track.
Until it went
But I
into
think
the
that's about when it
2000s.
was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the music he listened to, you could tag it that way, but
Right.
of course I had to ask my children.
Yeah, I had a hard time with that part. And then the cover itself, I found quite interesting. You know, obviously she was, you know, back to Eileen's point, there's some quote plagiarism, if you will, the cover, because it's a very obviously similar design to the cover of the original David Copperfield. But all the symbolism on the cover too, I found, you know, interesting. And it took me a minute. I spent some time saying, okay, where did this come from? The skeletons. I remember the kid that was drawing the skeletons. Who was the skeleton kid? I can't remember. But all of them. Sorry?
Tommy.
That's right. Yeah, but so it's interesting that all of the things on the cover, you could spend hours just going through, you know, trying to trace that back to different parts if you could get through it all. All right, so I don't have much else on this. I mean, I have notes in terms of the turning points and the origin story, and you know, some of the beautiful quotes that she had in here I thought were fabulous in terms of how she described situations. But at the end, you know, it was what I'm going to call it, one of those long drawn out coming of age stories. And I was hopeful that you guys would like this one. It seems like some of you did and some of you didn't. So we'll try again next month with something a little different. Any other comments, Christine?
I just ran across something that might maybe this is a tiny thing, but one of the quotes that I saved was Demon talking about nicknames, and he said the world is not short on this type of thing. All down the years, words have been flung around like pieces of shit, only to get stuck on a truck bumper and up yours with pride. Rednecks, moonshiners, ridge runners, hicks, and deplorables. Well, where did we hear deplorables? That was in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. So I'm wondering if the book, I mean, there were times when I thought the book was set in the 90s or at least began there, but then I thought it was a little bit later on.
Too modern or whatever, yeah.
But the word deplorable is to be mentioned there. I don't think that there's been a time when that has described a group of people except with Hillary Clinton.
I had a hard time placing the time frame on it, and I guess you guys, and my kids are. I guess Avery, maybe you could figure it out. Did you have
She might have just been writing it during 2016.
Yeah,
and
that's
that
right.
Stuck in her craw, and thought, oh, that works good.
That worked well. Yeah, let's stick it
they-
in here.
She also
Um,
referred to the fact that they had cell phones. So I
Yeah,
don't
but they
know
were
exactly
relatively new.
when cell phones became an everyday thing for everybody to have.
Right.
But I
Early
don't know.
2000s, so 20 years ago.
Okay.
Mhm.
Google says 1990s.
In the 90s.
Mhm.
Late night.
yeah, but they
Fell in
were
the
like
90s.
ugly cell phones, and not everybody had
They
them.
were
I mean,
big.
a brick,
Yeah, by brick.
And actually, the 2000s, it was the flip phone. So I don't know if they were how common.
Yeah.
It was
Nokia,
pagers back
actually,
then.
Nokia was the first phone I had. It was a, one like this. Yeah.
Don't you
And a
guys remember the
Magnavox
pagers?
was huge.
You call.
I never had a
somebody and
pager.
then
Never
you
had a
call-
pager.
Oh gosh, I had one. That's how it worked back then.
I had a pager.
It
and
wasn't
I had
that
to
long
find a-
ago.
I had to find a place, a payphone to call the people back. That was always
Exactly.
driving down the highway and trying to remember where the next payphone was.
It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm gonna stop this recording here.
Oh yeah, BlackBerry.
Like, right. I had one of those from work.